Hi, Sherry. So, this is my lesson study. I decided to do this in this kind of format. I just felt like it'd be more conversational, more kind of me just storytelling instead of writing. And I just felt like this would work best for me. So, anyways, let's get started. So, the title of my lesson is Pumpkin Growth Around the World, and I worked with Kayla for my lesson study. For my content areas, I was at a first grade classroom at Fairview Clifton. Fairview Clifton is about 5 minutes from the University of Cincinnati. It has grades kindergarten all the way through sixth grade. For my students, there's 18 of them. It's about 60% African American and about 40% white. Fairview Clifton is a magnet school, so a bunch of kids just apply to get in, and then it's just a random lottery of who does and who doesn't. Therefore, the student population's pretty diverse of geographic location within Cincinnati Public Schools, and then socioeconomic status and race. So the average day in my classroom kind of sucks. It's mostly independent work, really, a lot of worksheets pretty much all day. The scripted curriculum is in all aspects of her curriculum. So math, social studies, science, and language arts. So they do foundations, wit and wisdom, iReady, all that real fun stuff. Yeah, my kids just really sit at their desk all day and do independent work. They do stations about 1 to 2 times a day where they'll get to sit somewhere else in the room, but they don't get to talk with the people that they're sitting with because they'll be like in a small like group for the station. It's still independent. The room is just expected to be quiet pretty much at all times. And there's just a real lack of freedom. The kids have to be asked to go to the bathroom, get a drink. They can't move around. It's pretty harsh for first grade 6 and 7-year-olds. For my two students that I decided to really share about, I decided to kind of do the two opposite students, and then everyone kind of flows between. So first of all, we're going to start with Kylan. Oh, Kylan. I love Kylan. He is so hyper visible and he cannot function in this classroom at all. It was just not made for him. He is loud. He can get a little bit of some mood swings sometimes. He just cannot sit still because he's 6. He wants to talk to all of his friends. And whatever day Kylan is having is whatever day my teacher is going to have, what kind of day she's going to have, and then kind of whatever day my students are going to have, because she just takes her time to discipline him and reprimand him. And because of that, other kids miss out on learning time, and he misses out on learning time. So because of this, other students are then policing Kylan as well, and he just cannot, this classroom was not meant for him at all, and unfortunately, he's stuck in it. So then we have Simon. Simon is the polar opposite. He is kind of quiet, shy. He is probably smarter than I am, to be honest. And he can just, sit quietly. He wants to sit at his desk, do his work. Very robotic into the system of the schooling. He's definitely already acclimated to this environment, unfortunately, at such a young age. And everybody else kind of falls somewhere in between. I would say more people lean a little bit more towards Simon for the most part, but we definitely do still have, I would say, like 30% of the kids that lean a little bit more towards Kylan, where this is just not working for them. So prior to the lesson, my kids visited a pumpkin patch. They got to do a hayride. They got to pick a pumpkin, walk around, run around, and then they got to take a pumpkin home. They did this a few weeks prior to our lesson. They've also had a lot of lessons about maps, so they've looked at maps and talked about them, and then they've looked specifically at continents, bodies of the oceans, bodies of water, and then they are familiar with a few other countries because they did a unit on where other kids in other countries get their books. So they've looked at a few different countries like Canada, India, Papua New Guinea, and a couple other ones. So they are kind of familiar with this idea of countries, and they do know different continents. So for the standards, my social studies standard is the geography strand 4. So maps can be used to locate and identify places. For my science standards, I chose living things have basic needs, which are met by obtaining materials from the physical environment. My next standard for science is living things survive only in environments that meet their needs. For ELA, I have the standards ask and answer questions about key details in a text. I also have write informatory, explanatory texts that name a topic, supply some facts about the topic, and provide some sense of closure, as well as write narratives to recount 2 or more appropriately sequenced events, including some details regarding what happened, use temporal words to signal event order, and provide some sense of closure. And then lastly, add drawings or other visual displays to descriptions when appropriate to clarify ideas, thoughts, and feelings. So the 2 standards that I chose for my enduring understandings were, for the science, was living things have basic needs, which are met by obtaining materials from the physical environment. My enduring understanding that I wanted the students to take away was that every living thing has to have something in order to live and grow. Different environments may be suitable or not suitable for a living thing depending on what it offers. And for my social studies, I chose the geography strand, obviously, and maps can be used to locate and identify places. And then for my enduring understanding is that the world is made up of different places and environments. What I really wanted to do was connect these 2 mostly. This idea that, we're looking specifically at pumpkins, but all living things need certain basic needs in order to live, survive, and, grow. And there's different places across the world that you would find on a map that have different environments. So what they might grow here might not be able to be grown there because they have a different environment. So pumpkins, for example, in this sense can grow here, but might not be able to grow in other places of the world, or could be able to grow in places of the world, depending on the couple basic needs that they have. So for integration of contents, I'm sorry that my graphic organizer may look like a hot mess, but it made sense in my brain. It's basically just a Venn diagram. So for science by itself is that all living things receive their basic needs from environments to survive. Social studies by itself is that maps show you different locations and how far different places are. And then ELA by itself is that temporal words are used to show order. And then the connection I made between science and social studies is that living things grow in some places but not others. For the connection between science and ELA is that the growth of living things have a sequence. And then lastly, the connection between social studies and ELA is that all places have names and we can write about them. For this one, I just kind of meant it could be a country or a place that you could find on a local map per se, like a pumpkin patch or a farm, or it doesn't have to necessarily be like a continent or a country, but you can still write about those things. Also, I did want to mention for temporal words that my students did have a little bit of prior knowledge about temporal words. They've been using them, so they're pretty familiar. So we did want to practice these as well in their writing. So that's like first, next, then last, etc. So for the qualities of experience I chose is productive work going on, and I use the threshold concept. Teachers and students engage in critical consciousness to connect this. My kids do a lot of worksheets and a lot of independent work, and although they do a lot of work per se, which they turn in a lot of worksheets, it's not productivity. Them working on worksheets and sitting there is not being productive because there's such a lack of meaningful work. It's brainless work really, and it's not actually really helping them understand the world or what I would necessarily value. So I don't think there's productive work really going on in my classroom. So that's what I kind of wanted to bring in with this lesson. Also, I did want to mention that they don't do a lot of science. My teacher tries to act like they do, but they don't. And I love science. So I think science is really important for students of that age. A lot of them are interested in it. So I did want to include that as well. And then for my second quality of experience is the lesson tailored to the students and their interests. For my threshold concept to connect to this, I chose curriculum is co-constructed. So my students did show a lot of interest and excitement about their recent field trip to the pumpkin patch. They talked about it for weeks. They always wanted to share about it, and they still were talking about it. So I did want to use aspects of the field trip into the lesson so they could, have that prior knowledge and, have that interest in it. And then they also got to take a pumpkin home. So they have this knowledge already about what a pumpkin is and an experience to go along with it. So it's just bringing what they're interested in into the classroom. So really quickly, I wanted to go what our plan originally was for our lesson, and then I'll go into how it actually happened. We had 30 minutes to do this. We didn't really know that at the time. We were told the day of we'd have 30 minutes. But our topic, we had no freedom. Our host teacher chose our topic. She said we had to do pumpkins because every other first grade teacher was doing pumpkins, so we had to do pumpkins. So that kind of was not the best news, but we were going to, go with it and try to do our best because students did have a lot of prior knowledge. And I love science, and I could find some science standards that connected, and I really wanted to use those. For our steps, we had a little presentation. We were originally going to read a book that didn't end up working out, but that's okay. But it's just a short little video talking about the different conditions about a pumpkin, and it goes through this pumpkin like growth cycle from a seed all the way to a full-grown pumpkin. So then after we showed that video, we were going to have the students do a turn and talk about the conditions related to the field trip. And then we were going to show our map, which has the top 10 countries that grow the most pumpkins. And then we're going to do a turn and talk about what the conditions must be for those pumpkins to grow there. And then they were going to write and draw a picture, and then they were going to do a mock planing of a pumpkin, which didn't end up happening, unfortunately, but that's okay. The objectives that we wanted them to get was how pumpkins grow. They know what a pumpkin needs to grow, where they grow in the world. They could draw a picture to show the environmental needs of a pumpkin, and then plant a pumpkin, which also didn't end up happening, but that's all right. So next was what actually happened. This was the presentation we made. At the bottom, that's a screenshot from part of the video. It's just showing the different stages of a pumpkin, how it grows. I felt the video ended up being better because we were originally going to do a book, but then library said it was going to be on hold, wasn't available, all this hoo-ha. So we found this video, but I thought it was better because we couldn't bring in these aspects of the pumpkin, but they could actually see the real thing. So I felt like it was kind of better in a way. So anyways, it talks about the different stages from seed to blossom to bulb, which is where it's green, and then it's green and keeps growing until it's all ready and it turns orange. And then it will talk about the conditions of what it needs to grow, which is sunlight, soil, and water. So then after they watched this video, we asked the students, well, first of all, we discussed basically what they learned in the video, what the conditions and all that stuff. And then we asked them, how are the conditions in the video similar to what you saw on the field trip? So we asked this question because we wanted the students to kind of make this connection to what they were seeing and an experience that they had. So this was actually happening at the pumpkin patch they visited, and these pumpkins were growing in this way. So we wanted them to be able to make this connection. And we got answers like talking about, oh, well, the pumpkin patch must have soil, water, and sunlight for them to be able to grow there. And, that was correct. And then during their turn and talks, they were so funny. They were just loved like getting to talk to one another because they don't really get to ever talk to one another in class and kind of be a little noisy. But yeah, they seemed really engaged with it. And so that was really cool. But continuing, then we showed this map, and this is the top 10 countries that grow the most pumpkins. The darker colors are the countries with the most pumpkins, so that's China, India, and Russia. And then the ones that are paler have the least amount, so that's like Italy, Cuba, and Spain. And so we kind of showed this map, and we asked the students what conditions must the places on the map have for pumpkins to grow there, because we wanted them to once again kind of make this connection. Okay, well, we know what conditions these pumpkins need to have, and we know that we have that in a place that we visited close by, so they have that environment. So there's other places across the world that may have similar environments where, oh, they must have a lot of sunlight, soil, and water because a lot of pumpkins can grow there. And then there's countries that don't have those things, and those are the countries in white. So yeah, the kids were really good with that. They connected, oh, well, the countries and colors must have those conditions as well. And then we didn't originally plan this question, but we did end up asking the questions, if pumpkins grow on every continent except for Antarctica, which me and Kayla did the research and knew, why are most of the places on each continent not colored in? And Ian is this one little boy, and he's such a social studies science kid. It has this like little brain going on, and he was just pointed out like right away, which was really surprising, that he's like, well, because this map just shows the places that have the most. So it's not saying that the other countries don't have them at all. It's just saying they don't have enough to be on the map. And for first, like, honestly, it was so crazy that he like completely understood that. But yeah, it's just furthering his understanding of maps and sharing it with everybody else. And then it was like this huge light bulb went off, and it actually really contributed to the understanding that we weren't planning for in the first place. So here's some student work that we had. Sadly, some kids didn't get to do their pictures because we ran out of time, and my teacher decided that instead of them doing this work, that they had to do their worksheets after their special and lunch whenever they got back, because that was more important than what they're doing here, which was pretty frustrating. But some kids got to their picture, but I was so proud of their writing. We did have them we wanted them to use some temporal words, but we just gave them a couple prompts of questions. But we said, all you have to do is write about anything related to what you guys learned about. So that could be the process of it becoming a starting from a seed to becoming a pumpkin. It could be the conditions. It could be your time at the pumpkin patch. So they're not used to really this freedom in their writing. So they were really excited that they got to kind of choose what they wanted to write about. And I was just so proud. I mean, if you want to pause and read some of them, but Alice in the bottom left corner, I was so surprised that she, got almost all the spelling right, which wasn't even talked about. But she says first, it starts as a seed, it grows into a blossom, then the blossom has a bulb, the bulb becomes a pumpkin. And that was just really cool to see that she like really picked up on that. And then same with everybody else. We were really excited. But yeah, wish everyone had time to get to their drawings. But yeah, it turned out really awesome. And then to connect like the Q of E's of productive work and student interest that I was talking about, this is productive work, like I wish they got to do a little bit of a more hands-on experience, but for their writing that they've been working on, like I feel like this is much more valuable than a worksheet. They got to choose what they wanted to write about, what they were interested in, what portion of the lesson they were super interested in. And they all did it and were really excited and wanted to write about it and wanted to tell us about it. And these are the connections that I feel like are more important than just filling out a worksheet. So just to connect those CUNYs back to the actual results of the work. For the student response, they very active participation. I was really surprised. They were super engaged. They couldn't stop cracking up when they learned that pumpkins are actually green, and then once they're ripe and ready to be picked, then they turn orange. So, that was really fun. Almost every student wanted to share. I had tons of people raising their hands and kept wanting to tell me about their experience at the pumpkin patch. It was just really fun. They had great communication with one another during the turn-in talks, and they were excited to choose their own writing prompts. And then whenever they didn't finish, those that didn't finish their drawings or their writings were really upset, which I understood. I wish they could have gone back and fixed them, but overall, the students were just super engaged in the lesson because it's crazy. Whenever they actually get to learn something they're interested about, they get really excited. So it was really cool to see that. So what I liked about the lesson, I learned something as well as my students. I didn't know that there were other countries that grew way more pumpkins than the United States does, because it's just part of like a lot of our cultural traditions in the US. So that was really cool. So I got to learn something too, which was super fun. The students got to do something different. They're used to a lot of independent work. They got to talk with one another, share their ideas, choose something to write about in a cool way. So that was really exciting. And then I also liked that the students really enjoyed the lesson. They had a good time. They were just super engaged, which was awesome. I really liked that we were able to integrate the 3 different areas of social studies, science, and ELA. So that was really cool. I was kind of stressed about that, but I found it to be relatively not that challenging. So that was really nice. I also liked the final project, that the final products of that student work to look so different from everybody else. I mean, they all got the same directions, but whenever you allow the students to have that creative freedom, they all could, have very different writings, very different pictures. So it was just cool that they all looked so unique from one another. And then I was really proud of how much they understood about the map. I was really shocked. I thought that was going to be a really hard part for them to pick up, but they picked it up pretty easily. And, they were still talking about it after the lesson. So I really liked that they just were working hard, and it was just awesome. So what I would have changed, although I did like this lesson, there was a lot I probably would have changed about it if I had my own classroom. First of all, I wish we could have picked our own topic. Pumpkins did work out for them, but I mean, I just felt like I was very constricted of what me and Kayla could do, so that was pretty frustrating. I wish we could have gotten more time, because we did want to do like a mock garden of the students actually planting a pumpkin seed, just to have that kind of hands-on experience of like, oh, this is what it is, and like this is what it's going to become. So because they already had that pumpkin, but to see that like start of it. So we really wanted to do that. They did end up getting to take out pumpkin seeds the next week on Halloween. They got to like count them for math. So they did get to have that experience, but I felt like this one where they actually got to touch the soil and pour the water and plant the seed could have been really cool. And then also I would have wanted the students moving up around the classroom more. Once again, just with timing, they were supposed to do that with the mock garden, but they weren't able to. But it ended up being okay. And I mean, they could kind of scooch around their tables talking to people, but they didn't get to really like be up. Also, I would have changed, I wish I could have incorporated more cultural uses of pumpkins for the places on the map. So, what those countries did, if I would have also, this goes back to more time. So, like, why in China are they growing all these pumpkins? What do they use them for? Do they make certain recipes? Do they have a cultural significance? So, I'd like to go into that more as well. I wish it would have been a little bit less of a lecture type feel because it was me and Kayla standing at the front of the classroom with this PowerPoint presentation. It was really short, but it was still us sitting in front of the room asking questions. But yeah, it did feel a little lectury at times, which I would have probably changed. And then I also would have liked to have a little bit more one-on-one time with our 3 lower level students. We have 3 students on an IEP, and I think them being involved in those conversations with their peers was helpful, but especially for the writing portion of it, I wish I could have either like pulled them or back with me and we could have worked on it together, or just one-on-one with the 3 adults in the room. So I would have also changed that as well. And then if it was my own classroom, I would have made this part of the field trip the students went on instead of doing this weeks after they went on the field trip. That way it's fresh, and you could have introduced it before they went on the field trip, done an activity where I actually led an activity at the field trip with the pumpkins themselves, and then done an activity after, or done this activity after. So I just wish that we could have done this, sooner, and she didn't tell us to do this weeks later, but it is what it is. And then for what I learned is the importance of engagement. Whenever students have something that feels meaningful to them, they can connect to, and that they enjoy and are interested in, it's crazy how the just whole mood of the classroom shifted. I like loud talking, I like, communication with one another. So for them to just, be kids and talk to one another and get to share their experiences, it's crazy how much the classroom just felt like it lifted, And then also, we didn't have any behavioral issues during our, activity. So whenever the kids are engaged, you don't have to, keep reprimanding for behavioral issues. So that was something I learned. Also, more work does not equal more value or productivity. The students didn't get finished since they had worksheets to do that were supposedly more important than what they were doing at the time, which that doesn't mean that those worksheets were more valuable. I felt like this was a more valuable lesson, but in her eyes, that's what it is. But what I took away was make time for these moments and these kind of creative opportunities over what school system says is productivity. And then next, I also learned that student interest makes all the difference when creating lessons. So because the students were interested and had this prior experience, they just really took off with it. They really participated. They all wanted to share. It just made the lesson much more interesting. And then meaningfulness over cuteness. First grade, I mean, I get it. My teacher loves to do the cutesy crafts and the cutesy writings and all that stuff, just because they're looked at as, oh, look, they're 6 and 7, they're so cute, look how cute they are. But they can do more meaningful work. They can make these more meaningful connections with the world around them. And I just feel like what we did was more valuable than them doing all the same cutesy craft, where what really understanding are they going to take away with a pumpkin and put googly eyes on it? You know what I mean? So also my last thing that I learned is make time for science. I love science. I was in a 5th grade classroom in my last block, and it made me fall in love with the science curriculum because there's just so much you can do with it. And the kids are all so interested in science at that time. And, it's just really interesting. So just make time for it, and don't always get stuck in, what our standards and testings and all that stuff wants to cover. So yeah, I felt like this lesson overall was really important. I did want to change a few things, but overall I felt like it did go well with what we were given. And it did show me what kind of classroom I hope to have in the future. And yeah, I felt like it was a really beneficial experience. So that is all I have for you. So thank you very much.